The saddest thing about love is that it cannot last forever, but even the heartbreak is soon forgotten. A quote by William Faulkner. Love is a sacrifice of yourself, to kneel at the foot of your heart and submit all. But once you've given everything, you can't take it back. It's only returned after paying the tax of pain. Love isn't a voluntary action. You can't control who you feel for. That's why we use the phrase, "someone stole my heart." The quote by William Faulkner is true. Love won't last forever, but even when your feelings are gone, you're still a slave to the memories of what used to be. And when you're a slave to your mind, your heart has no power. May 26, 1993. The world would make way for Jamilla Smith. When she entered this world, the place she would call home at that time would be Sanford, North Carolina. Around the age of 9, Jamila's parents would separate, where she would then be raised by her mother Tina and her stepfather, Pierre. Growing up, Jamila is what you refer to as an army brat, someone who was raised by a parent that was in the military, which happened to be her mother. Due to her mother being in the military, they moved around a lot, especially abroad, with one of Jamila's favorite schools being in the UK. Jamila is described as someone who loved to sing, dance, and place smiles on other faces. Someone who touched the heart of many people with her radiant smile and loving heart, but also a compassionate nature. It's no secret that those who encountered her came to love her. Jamila's final stop on the road of her education would be in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where she would graduate from Pine Forest High School. After leaving high school, she would end up marrying a military man, whom she would bring forth with a son. In the beginning, things were great, but as time progressed, they found out that they just weren't meant for each other, which would lead to them separating in the year of 2018. Not long after a divorce, a then 25-year-old Jamila would begin to navigate life single. But with her charming personality, it wouldn't be long before she would capture the attention of another man, a guy who goes by the name of Daniel Harmon. While dating Daniel, they too would conceive a child, another baby boy. By the year of 2023, Jamilla Smith would be 30 years old, and her boyfriend Daniel would be 34, where they would be residing in North Augusta, South Carolina. It would be there that they would share a home along with the two boys, which completes their little family. Sadly, by that time, a place that was supposed to be a happy home couldn't be further from it. A boyfriend who was once sweet and charming was now controlling, but also abusive. 2023 would be the year that things would begin to escalate, and Jamila would begin to realize that she would be better off alone. August 22nd, 2023. Police would be dispatched to the home of Jamila and Daniel. They are responding to a call about an altercation. When authorities arrived on the scene, they would quickly realize that Jamila and Daniel had been arguing. Jamila had locked Daniel outside of the home, in which afterwards he had kicked the door down to regain entry. Jamila would describe to the authorities that Daniel was irate, but he had also put his hands on her. When the authorities questioned Daniel, he would deny these accusations, and he would tell the authorities she was making it up. That night, Daniel wouldn't be arrested, even though on that night, Jamila had visible bruising to her lip. The officers explained that on that night, Jamila wasn't making eye contact, and her story kept changing. So due to those reasons, They were led to believe she wasn't being truthful. Later that night, after the altercation, Jamila would email the local authorities. Inside of this email, she would detail the abuse, but she would also attach photos of the injuries of that night, but also photos of injuries prior. She would detail that she was afraid. However, her email was never responded to. After this incident, Jamila would go on with life because after all, she had a son with him. And like most women do, she wanted to work it out. But things weren't getting any better. And months later, police would once again be called to their residence. November 9th, 2023. This is the day that Jamila had decided she's had enough. And on that day, she would begin packing her car, getting ready to leave. While in the process of packing her things, Daniel would be trying to stop her. In the course of trying to stop her, Daniel would retrieve a knife from the kitchen. After retrieving the item, he would sustain a self-inflicted injury. But afterwards, he would blame Jamila and say, "Look what you made me do." So, just like before, the authorities would once more be dispatched to their home. After arriving on the scene, Daniel would explain to the authorities that he didn't mean to harm himself, but rather injured himself cooking breakfast, and that he was only upset because he wanted Jamila to stay, and that this was just like any other argument. And he told the authorities the situation was under control. When the investigation concluded, Daniel Harmon would be transported to the hospital to treat his injury, while Jamila would be left home alone. Luckily, at the time of the altercation, her sons weren't present because it was nearing the holidays and they were staying with relatives. But nonetheless, after Daniel was transported to the hospital, Jamila would take that time to continue packing her and her children's things. She was preparing to say her final farewell to the home that brought so much pain. But to Jamila's surprise, when she was bringing the last of her things out to the driveway, she would realize that her vehicle was gone. Someone had stolen it, with all of her possessions inside of it. After she realized her vehicle was gone, she would once again call the police. Now they're here for a second time in one day, but this time it's for a stolen vehicle. She would tell the authorities that she believed that one of Daniel's friends had taken her car, because after all, Daniel couldn't have done it because he was at the hospital. So the authorities would question him, but he would tell them he had no knowledge of what happened to the vehicle. And with no evidence, the only thing they could do was put a bolo out on the car. That same day, Jamila would contact her mother and let her know what transpired. But her mother lived 12 hours away in Florida and couldn't get to her quick enough. So she would arrange for her aunt, who only lived 8 hours away, to come pick her up. But this would take some time. Jamila's family wouldn't be able to pick her up until the next day. Her mother would ask her if she needed a hotel to stay at while she waited, but Jamila would decline. She would tell them everything's okay. By the next morning of November 10th of 2023, the authorities would once again be called to their residence. Jamila had stayed at the house that night, but when Daniel had gotten out of the hospital, he came home and he began to argue with her. She would tell the authorities that this argument lasted all the way from the evening of November 9th until the morning of November 10th. This time, when the authorities showed up, Daniel wasn't present. He had left the home, and Jamila would detail that once again, he had put his hands on her. The officers would make notation that she had visible scratch marks on her neck and other areas of her body. While Jamila was talking to the authorities, Daniel Harmon would show back up to the home while they're in the midst of an investigation. And he would tell the authorities, once again, that she was lying and she was making it up. But this time, there was visible evidence, and Daniel Harmon had blood under his fingernails. Now, do you want to hear something crazy? Despite Jamila having scratch marks and Daniel having visible evidence under his fingernails, once again, on that day, Daniel was not arrested. The authorities took photos of Jamila's injuries and then they left. They went to headquarters to begin drawing up paperwork for a warrant. Now, why they had to go and draw up paperwork for a warrant, I don't know. Because when you have visible evidence and visible injuries, that's enough grounds for an immediate arrest. But, as I said, Daniel was free. Luckily, on that day, Jamila's aunt would arrive from out of town to take her to Florida to live with her mother. About a week passes, and it's now November 17th of 2023. This would be the day that Jamila's car was found. And guess what? The car was taken by one of Daniel's friends. The culprit was identified as Thomas Tompkins. When Jamila finds out that they have located her vehicle, she's elated because that car had all of her personal belongings, including her purse. So she would most definitely have to go and retrieve her car. Jamila would begin to make preparations to go back to South Carolina to pick up her vehicle. But when she arrives, she's devastated to learn that her car was in an impound lot. But not only was her car in an impound lot, her car was totaled. She couldn't even drive it. So now she has no vehicle. Seeing that she didn't have a car, she would call her family and let them know her situation. And her family would team up together to get her money so she could purchase another vehicle. But this would take time. So now she's back living in South Carolina. The plan was to stay in South Carolina until she could purchase a vehicle, in which afterwards she would drive back to Florida, back to her mother's home. A few more days would pass, and the date is now December 2nd of 2023. That day, the mother of Jamila would receive a FaceTime call. But when she looks down at her phone, she realizes that this call is coming from Daniel Harmon's phone. And when she answers it, it's her daughter. When her mother realizes that she's contacting her from Daniel's phone, she's immediately upset because she's once again back with Daniel, the guy she was trying to get away from. She was FaceTiming her mother to let her know that she was okay, but that she wouldn't be able to reach her because Daniel had gotten upset and thrown her phone out on a highway. Armed with this information, her mother's quick thinking would think about the Find My Phone app. So she would tell her daughter where her phone was using the location. Around 6 p.m. on that day, Jamila would send a text to her mother. She let her know that she had retrieved her phone and thanked her for helping. And then she told her mother that she loved her. She told her mother goodbye and that she'll talk to her later. But little did her mother know that that would be the last time she ever heard from her daughter. December 3rd, 2023. Knowing that Jamila is now back with Daniel, her mother is worried. So she would attempt to call Jamila in the morning just to check on her. But Jamila doesn't answer. A little time passes, and during the afternoon hours, she would send a text. But that text isn't replied to. The mother is now beginning to worry, and she calls around to family and friends, wanting to know if Jamila had contacted anyone, but she hadn't. She then contacted Jamila's first husband, her now ex-husband, and asked if he had seen her, but he said no. But he would also tell the mother that she was supposed to pick up her oldest son today, but she never arrived. Armed with this information, the mother now knows something isn't right. With this feeling, the mother would contact the authorities in order to do a wellness check. And when she gave them the address, the authorities would tell her, "We were just at that home last night." They would detail that officers were dispatched to the location, but once they showed up, no one was home, so they just left the scene. But they did agree to go back out and look again. So, once again, the authorities are dispatched to the home of Jamila and Daniel. And when they arrive and knock on the door, no one answers. But outside of the home, one of the officers finds a set of keys that belong to Jamila. And near a dumpster, they would locate her cell phone. While observing the exterior of the home, they would also realize that there was a shoe print on the front door, but there was also a window that was open with damage to the screen. With all of this compiled together, they now have probable cause to enter the home. And when they enter the home is empty. At this point, with no sign of Jamila or Daniel, the only thing they can do is leave the home and assign an investigator to the case. Meanwhile, while the mother is waiting to be contacted by an investigator, she's calling around to hospitals and checking if her daughter has been checked in anywhere. But this leads to nowhere. She would even get so frantic that she would begin calling the family members of Daniel, and she was able to get in touch with Daniel's brother. While speaking with Daniel's brother, he would tell Jamila's mother that on the night of December 2nd, he got a call from his brother, Daniel. He says that in the background, he heard Jamila screaming, saying that she had been hit by a car. He says that that's all he knows. The phone call ends, but they're still no closer to finding Jamila. The next day, December 4th of 2023, an official investigator would be assigned to the case, and he would reach out to the media to let them know that Jamila and Daniel were missing and to be on the lookout for them. Releasing this to the media would turn to work out because they would get a call from an employee who worked at a car rental place, and she would tell the authorities that she rented a car to Daniel the day before. She would also let the authorities know that they had GPS tracking capabilities and that the car was in Georgia. So the authorities go to that location. But by the time they arrive, the car is no longer there. The next day, they would call back the car rental place and ask for the location again. It was in another place in Georgia. But this time, when they go to the location, they do indeed spot the vehicle. The black Dodge Charger that was rented to Daniel was outside of a residence. And when they knocked on the door, the owner of that home would come outside. And they would say that Daniel was indeed inside and that he was armed. But they would also tell the authorities that currently he was passed out on pills. So, needless to say, because he was high, he was taken into custody with no problem. Once at headquarters, Daniel is now alert, and he's questioned by the authorities about Jamila's whereabouts. But he says he dropped her off at a friend's home, and he hadn't seen her since. Besides that information, he wasn't cooperating. So the authorities would decide to search the vehicle. And while searching the vehicle, inside of it was a large amount of blood, as well as the presence of a cleaning agent. So they would bag and tag the evidence and ship it off for DNA testing. But that takes time. Luckily, Daniel wasn't going anywhere because the paperwork for his warrant for the domestic dispute prior was already finished. So they were holding him on that. And by December 6th of 2023, he would be charged with kidnapping. Daniel is now in the county jail, but Jamila is nowhere to be found. Her family is frantic and actively searching for her. Her face is beginning to pick up recognition on social media, but no one can point anyone to the right direction. A week has now passed after the arrest of Daniel, and the DNA analysis from the blood from the vehicle is now in, and that blood would be confirmed to be that of 30-year-old Jamilla Smith. This DNA analysis only solidified what they already knew, that it belonged to Jamila. But with the amount found in the vehicle, she was now presumed deceased. The search for Jamila now shifts from a missing persons investigation to a search for a body.
Why don't you look at your screen right here? This woman, originally from Fayetteville, has been missing since December 2nd, and now she's presumed dead. This is 30-year-old Jamilla Smith.
Stunningly beautiful. That's how family members describe 30-year-old Jamilla Smith, a graduate of Pine Forest High School in Fayetteville. Now, her ex-boyfriend, Daniel Harmon, a man with whom she has a child, has been charged with a murder, but her body has yet to be found.
It's just overwhelming that nothing has been recovered, no answers. We're waiting for trials. It's really like, it's kind of like being stagnant, like you don't know what to do.
Smith was living with her ex-boyfriend in Aiken, South Carolina. Family members say she had been trying to break up with him for some time. Harmon was taken into custody December 5th after investigators from the Aiken County Sheriff's Office found enough evidence to arrest him, including Smith's blood in his car. Family members say the whole ordeal is a nightmare that's left them speechless.
On December 23rd of 2023, Daniel Harmon would be formally indicted on charges of murder, and he would once again be dragged to headquarters. They would take him to the interrogation room and let him know, look, we had blood in the vehicle. We've tested it. It belongs to your girlfriend. The game is up. Tell us where she's at. But Daniel still isn't cooperating. He has nothing to say. This would make the investigation that much harder because Jamila is missing and her family is searching for answers. The year of 2023 would come to a close and greet the beginning of 2024. And by the beginning, there was still no new information, but the authorities were hard at work. They were canvassing areas, talking to witnesses, you name it. And by April 7th of 2024, they would get a break in the case. After talking to witnesses, they would ID another suspect, Brian Hampton Jr., the cousin of Daniel. The unknown witness would detail that they had first-hand knowledge that Brian helped Daniel get new phones. He helped him with money, basically was aiding him in his escape. But the witness also told the authorities that they had reason to believe he helped discard of the body. So the authorities would go and arrest Brian Hampton Jr. But when he had his court date, he would plead for a bond. He would tell the judge he had no knowledge of what happened to Jamila and that he was innocent, and he begged for a bail. However, his bail would be denied. Due to this being an open investigation, the authorities aren't releasing much. But if I had to take a guess, I would say that Brian cracked. Because on May 2nd of 2024, another person would be arrested, Clyde Henley, and he would also be charged with accessory after the fact. The warrant would detail that he also helped Daniel get a new cell phone and helped discard of the body. Basically, the same allegations that were against his cousin. So, he would be transported to headquarters. And just like Brian, he would deny all allegations. But the authorities had searched his car, and inside of the car of Chris Henley, they found evidence that the body of Jamilla Smith was once inside of that car. So, in his case, there's no denying this. Now again, this is an ongoing investigation, and they aren't releasing all the details. But miraculously, on May 10th of 2024, the investigation would take another turn. They would recover the body of Jamilla Smith. May 10th, 2024. Around 3 and 5 p.m., police would be dispatched to the 2100 block of Silver Bluff Road, an area that they had previously searched, an area that was roughly 10 minutes away from the home of Jamila. And inside of a wooded area, they would find the body of 30-year-old Jamilla Smith.
An update to a story we've been tracking for you out of Aiken County. Investigators say they have located the body of missing mother Jamila Smith. She had not been seen since December 2nd and has been presumed dead by investigators. Aiken Bureau Chief Sean Cabbage has the latest.
On Thursday, investigators discovered human remains in a wooded area on Silver Bluff Road, identified as Jamila Smith. The 30-year-old disappeared on December 2nd. The case is still under investigation.
An autopsy would be conducted on the body of Jamilla Smith, and when it concluded, they would come to find she died due to gunshot wounds to the head area. What happened to 30-year-old Jamilla Smith is completely tragic. And again, this is an ongoing investigation, so a motive isn't clear-cut, but I think we're kind of all on the same page that she was getting ready to leave him, so he reacted. I mean, it's not that hard to figure out. I'll try my best to keep you guys updated in the community section. For a case like this, when a mother is taken from her 2 young boys, it's just sad all around. But to think that she had previously called the authorities and emailed them without a response, well, Daniel isn't the only one to blame, and I'll leave it at that. It's all around tragic. Rest in peace, Jamilla Smith. Thank you for being a light for others.